said, shut it up, seal it, unto the time of the end. That's what he's talking about. Now, 1798, that's when Berthier took the papal power brought it into captivity. 1798. So, when we take a look at this, watch what the Scripture says, folks. Very important, because Christ said, after the disciples were to flee Jerusalem, He said there would be a great time of tribulation. Now listen. Immediately after the what? Immediately after the tribulation of those days. In other words, immediately after this 1260 years, something's going to happen. The sun will be darkened. The moon will give its light, not give light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. He told them, listen, immediately after the tribulation of those days, this is what is going to happen. 25, 30 years before 1798, the time of tribulation had pretty much come to an end. Through the preaching of Luther and Knox and Zwingli and Calvin and all the reformers and what had taken place, persecution, hard times had pretty much dropped and stopped. Probably 30 years before 1798. So what happens? Watch what takes place. Folks, listen. Said certain things were going to happen. I told you last night in Revelation, the 6th chapter, it talks about the seals. And I told you the 6th seal had already happened. Listen to what it says here about the 6th seal. And I looked, and when He opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as a sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Now, interesting that the Scripture lines it up. He said that there would be tribulation. He said after the tribulation, there would be a great earthquake. After the earthquake, says the sun would be darkened. And he said after the sun being darkened, the moon would turn the color of blood. And after that, it says the stars would fall from heaven. All that was to take place. Says 1798. Okay, let's see what happened. Lisbon earthquake, 1755. Lisbon earthquake, 1755. Tribulation had just ceased. And it says there would be a great earthquake. And the Scripture put it in that order, folks. Said the first thing would be a great earthquake. And this is what happened. It was in Spain and Portugal that the shock manifested itself, its extreme violence. At Cadiz, the inflowing wave was said to be 60 feet high. Mountains, some of the largest in Portugal, were impetuously shaken, as it were from their very foundation, and some of them opened at their summits, which were split and rent in a wonderful manner, huge masses of them, both thrown down into the adjacent valleys. At Lisbon, a sound of thunder was heard underground, and immediately after it, a violent shock threw down the greater part of that city. Listen to this. In the course of about 6 minutes, 60,000 people perished. The sea first retired and laid the bar dry. It then rolled in, rising 50 feet or more above its ordinary level. You know, just exactly marking the end of the time of tribulation and the beginning, folks, of the time of the end. In other words, you and I are living in the time of the end. That's what the Scripture says. And I sometimes wonder, what was it, 2 years ago now? in which we had a tsunami, that in a matter of a few minutes, not 60,000 people perished, 250,000 perished. I wonder if you and I ought not to be thinking real serious about where we are in the stream of time. But he said there would be an earthquake, and he said after the earthquake, it says the day would go dark. The sun would not give its light. The dark day of May 19, 1780. Don't know if you've ever read about it. No real good reason for that to happen. But at 10 o'clock in the morning, the day just went dark. Listen as it describes what it's like. Almost, if not altogether alone, as the most mysterious and yet unexplained phenomena of its kind, stands the dark day of May 19, 1780. A most unaccountable darkening of the whole visible heavens and the atmosphere in New England. Fear, anxiety, and awe gradually filled the minds of the people. Women stood at the door, looking out upon the dark landscape. Men returned from their labor in the fields. The carpenter left his tools, the blacksmith his forge, and the tradesman his counter. Schools were dismissed, and tremblingly children fled homeward. Candles were used. Hearths fire shone as brightly as on a moonless evening in autumn. Fowls retired to their roost, went to sleep, cattle gathered, and at the plaster bars and lowed, frogs peeped, birds sang their evening song, bats flew about, but the human knew that night had not come. Just 10 o'clock in the morning, it went dark. Why? Oh, I've heard and I've read some of the reasoning that people give today, but I can tell you right now, there was never a day like that in which it just went dark. Not only did it go dark that day, but just exactly as the Scripture had said, when the moon came up that night. It's the color of blood. I'll read to you about it. It was interesting to me that when John F. Kennedy was running for President of the United States, as he went across the country giving his speech, many, many times he closed his speech with this words. I want you to listen to it. It's most interesting because it's talking about this dark day. May 19, 1780, the legislature at Connecticut was then in session at Hartford. A very general opinion prevailed. The day of judgment was at hand. The House of Representatives, being unable to transact their business, adjourned. A proposal to adjourn the council was under consideration. When the opinion of Colonel Abraham Davenport was asked, he answered, "I am against an adjournment. The day of judgment is either approaching or it is not. If it is not, then there is no cause for an adjournment. If it is, I choose to be found doing my duty. I wish, therefore, that candles may be brought." Said, stay about my business. Work, if the Lord's coming, I'd just soon be found here. But dear friends, what I'm trying to get across to you is the Scripture said clearly, it said after the days of those tribulations, there would be a great earthquake. And then it said, after that, then the day would go dark. The Scripture's not only telling you what's going to happen, it's telling you the order that it took place in. And it said, after the day has gone dark, the moon will be the color of blood. Listen. Though at 9 o'clock that night, the moon